Why you do this? Understand yourself. Your brain was never planning to just improve a little. No, your brain wanted a cinematic rebirth. One tiny moment happens. Maybe you watched one motivational video. Maybe you cleaned your room. Maybe you drank water and suddenly felt emotionally powerful for 14 seconds. And your brain instantly goes, that's it. Everything changes now. Now somehow you're planning. Waking up at 5 a.m., building 3 businesses, journaling every day, becoming emotionally healed, fixing your sleep schedule, learning 4 new skills, meal prepping, meditating, reading books, becoming attractive, mentally stable, financially successful, spiritually evolved, and fully transformed by next Thursday. Wait, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand why motivation explodes this hard, why it disappears so fast, and why your brain keeps restarting your entire life like it's a Netflix reboot every 9 days. You know that terrifyingly optimistic feeling? This time is different. Your brain suddenly becomes delusionally confident. You open Notes app like a CEO preparing a billion-dollar empire. You write new life rules, and suddenly you're creating morning routines, gym schedules, productivity systems, dopamine detox plans, personality upgrades, skincare routines, financial plans, emotional healing journeys. All at 2:14 a.m. Meanwhile, you haven't even answered the email from 3 weeks ago. But your brain doesn't care. Because right now, your future self feels godlike. Humans are genuinely insane with future self fantasies. Your brain loves imagining a version of you that magically has discipline, emotional stability, confidence, consistency, meal prep containers, color-coded calendars, and somehow enjoys jogging at sunrise. Meanwhile, current you is laying in bed eating snacks while watching productivity videos to feel productive without actually doing anything. And weirdly, that fantasy version of yourself feels so emotionally real. Like your brain already got partial dopamine from imagining the transformation. That's why buying one notebook suddenly feels like, my life finally has direction. The dangerous part? The motivation feels incredible, like your entire nervous system suddenly got flooded with hope. For a few hours, you genuinely believe, I'm becoming the person I was meant to be. And honestly, that feeling is addictive, because your normal daily life feels messy, slow, unclear, emotionally complicated, but new life starts tomorrow, feels clean, cinematic, like all your problems are finally organizing themselves into a beautiful transformation montage. Until the next morning arrives. And suddenly your 5 a.m. transformation journey feels very different at 5 a.m. Here's the part nobody explains. Your brain loves dramatic transformation fantasies because fantasy gives fast dopamine. Reality does not. Planning gives dopamine. Imagining gives dopamine. Researching gives dopamine. Visualizing gives dopamine. Actually repeating boring habits for 8 months? Your brain goes, absolutely not. Because the brain constantly overestimates future energy, future motivation, future discipline, and future emotional stability. Your brain genuinely thinks, future me will somehow become a completely different species. And this creates the weirdest emotional cycle. You get motivated, you plan everything, you become emotionally attached to the fantasy version of yourself. Then reality starts moving slower than your imagination expected. And suddenly your brain panics. Because internally you thought, I should already feel transformed by now. But real growth feels weirdly unimpressive. Nobody talks about this. Real progress often feels like repeating tiny boring actions, doing things badly at first, forgetting, restarting, showing up tired and improving painfully slowly. Which is not the cinematic fantasy your brain sold you at 1:47 a.m. So your brain creates a new solution. Restart again. New routine, new system, new app, new identity, new life plan, new motivational video, because restarting feels emotionally cleaner than continuing imperfectly. Your brain keeps chasing the feeling of transformation, instead of the actual process of transformation. That's why people constantly say, this time I'm serious, even though they said the same thing last Monday, and the Monday before that. Part of you genuinely wants change, like really wants it. You want peace, confidence, structure, momentum, a better future. But another part of your brain is terrified of discomfort, slowness, uncertainty, inconsistency, failure, looking stupid, and not progressing fast enough. So your brain creates fantasy motivation spikes instead, because fantasizing about becoming your dream self feels safer than slowly building them in reality. Wait, That one hurts a little. So the cycle becomes emotional overwhelm, then motivation explosion, then unrealistic expectations, then temporary perfection, then exhaustion, then guilt, then avoidance, then new motivational reset, then repeat forever. And after enough loops, people start believing, I just lack discipline. But that's usually not the real problem. The real problem is, your brain keeps treating transformation like an emotional event, instead of a repetitive process. Most people secretly expect progress to keep feeling exciting. That's the trap, because motivation is emotional energy, and emotional energy naturally fluctuates. Nobody stays wildly inspired forever. Not athletes, not artists, not entrepreneurs, not emotionally healthy people. The people who succeed are usually not the people with endless motivation. They're the people who stop panicking when motivation disappears. That changes everything. Your brain also attaches identity to starting over. Because restarting feels hopeful. It feels like, this version of me failed, but the next version will finally fix everything. So people become addicted to planning, preparing, optimizing, researching, imagining, and reorganizing their entire existence. Without realizing, they're emotionally living inside possibility, instead of reality. And possibility feels very safe. Reality is where ego gets humbled. The people you admire probably aren't motivated all the time. They just stopped turning every imperfect day into an identity crisis. That's it. They stopped asking, do I feel motivated? And started asking, can I still show up a little today? That's why real growth looks almost boring from the outside. Tiny repetitions, tiny progress, tiny consistency, over and over and over again. No cinematic rebirth, just accumulated evidence. And honestly, your life probably does not need a total reinvention, a new personality, a 47-step morning routine, emotional perfection, or a dopamine-fueled transformation arc. Your brain just wants certainty. That's why it creates giant fantasy plans. But real confidence usually comes after action, not before it, which means you do not need to become your ideal self overnight. You just need to stop abandoning yourself every time progress becomes unexciting. Because the boring days count too. Actually, they count more. The random Tuesday where you barely feel motivated, feel emotionally flat, don't feel transformed, don't feel inspired, don't feel special, but still do the thing anyway? That is usually the moment real change starts becoming real. Not the motivational high, the repetition after the high. So the goal isn't stay motivated forever. That's impossible. The real goal is build systems gentle enough that your brain stops needing dramatic restarts. Smaller goals, less perfection, less identity pressure, less new life starts tomorrow. More consistency, flexibility, realism, imperfect repetition, because sustainable people usually aren't superhuman. They just stop treating every bad day like the end of the story. And weirdly, that's when progress finally stops collapsing. Your brain was never broken for wanting a new life. Honestly, that part is beautiful. Hope is beautiful. Wanting more for yourself is beautiful. The problem starts when your brain believes transformation only counts if it feels dramatic. Because real change is usually quieter than fantasy. Slower, messier, less cinematic, but also way more real. And eventually, those tiny boring repetitions become an entirely different life. So now I need to know, what's the most unrealistic, new life starts tomorrow plan your brain has ever convinced you was completely achievable overnight?